Hello YouTube! Today, I am doing part 2 of the Snowblower carburetor series. Before we get into the video, I must confess this is not my real voice. I am experimenting with AI voice software. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Okay, let's get into it. In the first video I discussed how to clean the bottom of the carburetor by removing the bulb. In this video I am going to discuss how to smooth out surging and idle problems by cleaning the secondary jet. The secondary jet is also referred to as the pilot jet. It controls how the engine runs at low idle. If this jet is plugged, the engine will not idle. Instead, it will just stall. At high idle, or normal operating RPM, a plugged pilot jet will cause the engine to surge up and down. This is easily corrected by removing the pilot jet, cleaning it, and reinstalling it into the carburetor. First, we will remove the choke knob with a pair of pliers. It should pop off pretty easily. Next, we will remove the 4 10mm bolts that secure the airbox to the engine. This process will vary by model, but the principles of this video will still apply. Using a magnetic driver is helpful for this application. Next, the throttle handle needs to be lined up with the notch in the airbox cover. The airbox cover is then lifted up to clear the choke shaft, and then pulled back to clear the throttle handle. The primer line needs to be removed from this little clip. It should pull out pretty easily. The primer line needs to be removed from the primer bulb. Sometimes it can simply be pulled off. Other times the primer bulb needs to be pried off in order to gain better access. In this instance, it was being stubborn. Do not pull too hard on the line, or you will break the line or the barb on the primer. As you can see here, I am using a flathead screwdriver to pry the primer bulb out of the cover. Once the bulb is off, it's much easier to remove the primer line. Once the line has been removed, snap the primer bulb back into the cover. The line will be reattached at the end of the repair. Now that we have access to the top of the carburetor, we can see two things. One is the pilot jet, and the other is the idle stop screw. The pilot jet sits under the idle stop screw. The idle stop screw has two functions. Its first function is to control the low idle speed. Its second function is to keep the pilot jet held in place. Here we can see the idle stop screw and pilot jet a little better. I am currently unscrewing the idle stop screw. The black plastic piece directly under the screw is the pilot jet. The angle to unscrew the idle stop screw is not ideal. Getting it out isn't too bad. Getting it back in can be slightly more difficult. The idle stop screw has a funky half-moon shape to it. You will just need to find a flathead screwdriver that fits snugly into it. We can now use our flathead screwdriver to pry out the pilot jet. Once it's out, a small pair of needle nose pliers works well to remove it. I like to use some compressed air and blow out the hole that the pilot jet was in. If you do not have compressed air, you could use some carburetor cleaner. Next, we need to clean the very small hole in the pilot jet. I have found that the bristles on a wire brush work well for this. Make sure the wire is going all the way through the jet. Once you have cleaned the jet with a small wire, blow it out with compressed air. Again, if you do not have compressed air, then carburetor cleaner is the next best thing to flush it out with. Now we are going to very carefully reinstall the jet. Again, needle nose pliers work well. Take note of the flat side of the pilot jet. This flat side needs to be parallel with the carburetor. If the flat side is not lined up correctly, the jet will not drop down all the way. Sometimes the O-rings on the jet can get crusty and will not slide well. Applying a small amount of motor oil on the jet will let it slide into the carburetor more easily. Use your screwdriver or pliers to press the jet into the hole all the way. We will now install the idle stop screw back into the carburetor. Having a screwdriver that holds the screw is helpful. Again, the angle to get this screw started is not ideal, but can be done. Thread the screw into the carburetor body until it sits about halfway over the pilot jet. We will test run the engine before reinstalling the airbox cover, so final adjustments can be done then. We can now do a test run of the engine to ensure our repair was successful. When the throttle is moved to the right, the engine RPM should drop down to a nice slow idle. If the engine does not idle down, back out the idle stop screw a few turns. If the engine is still surging up and down, then remove the pilot jet again and repeat the repair. When you are happy with the way the engine is running, you can reinstall the airbox cover. Installation is the reverse of removal. Attach the primer line, line up your choke shaft and throttle arm into the appropriate holes in the airbox cover. Install the 4 bolts for the airbox cover. Note that the 2 shorter bolts go on the side of the engine, and the longer ones on the rear. Finally, install the choke knob, line it up, and snap it down into place. Congratulations! You have now completed the repair. I hope this video helps you. Make sure to check out the first video in this series. It is important to make sure the carburetor is clean and the main jet is clear before moving on to the pilot jet. Thanks for watching, and have a fantastic day.